Bless Jesus while in mortal flesh I hold my frail abode. Still would my spirit rest on thee, my
uplifting to our hearts to hear those things that we've heard already this morning. While he was speaking, I thought about that blank look. You know, I have seen that many times, and most times it's on my own face. When someone asks you a question, our little church in Canyon, there's people going there that had never even heard of the Old Baptist Church. And Brother Thomas, that sign out there will do more than you may realize. A family came in one time and said, how'd you hear about our church? They said, we just saw the sign and wondered what a primitive Baptist was. The Lord does work in mysterious ways. Many times when you're talking to people who are not familiar with the Old Baptist, they'll ask a question, and I'll give them that blank look. I know what they mean. But if we're going to have a biblical discussion amongst Old Baptists or anybody else, to get the true meaning of what we're talking about, we need to use biblical terms. Because as soon as we begin trying to explain something that's not a biblical term, I get confused, and so does everybody else. Now, Brother Don, do you believe that Great Commission ended with the apostles, or do you believe it's still with us here today? You're going to get a blank look. Where is that term, Great Commission, anywhere in the Bible? Amen. If you can find it, we'll talk about that term. Now, go to the Acts, the 26th chapter and 12th verse, and you're going to see that a commission was given. Was it given by God? Was it given to one of his apostles? You'll see the 26th chapter and the 12th verse is talking about Saul was given authority and commission, whereupon I went to Damascus with authority and commission from the chief priest. That is the only time you will find that term commission in the entire New Testament. Given by Saul, given to Saul by the chief priest. What was that commission to do? Acts 8:3 says he caused havoc in the church. He persecuted the church in the synagogue. Voted, even given consent to their death. The time that the term commission is found in the Bible, it caused havoc in the church. So was that commission given? The question is bad. Neither one. There was never a great commission given. You know, Christ asked Paul about the 14th verse of that 26th chapter about hard to kick against the pricks. Have you ever thought about what that means? Growing up as a barefooted farm kid in West Texas with prickly pear cactus, I know I'm not going to kick against any prickly pear prick. What did the Lord mean when he asked Paul that question? You have to go back to the book of Numbers, the 33rd chapter and the 55th verse, and you'll find what I think Paul had in mind when he was on that road to Damascus. Because in that 33rd chapter of the book of Numbers, after the children of Israel had left Egypt, they had crossed over the Jordan River into Canaan's land, into the land of Canaan. And what was their instruction at that point? The Lord instructed them to get rid of everybody that they came across. Get rid of the Canaanites, get rid of all their idols, get rid of their pictures, because if you leave anyone in there, they're going to be pricks in your eyes, thorns in your side, and they're going to vex you in that land. Matter of fact, the Lord told them if you don't do that, he's going to bring upon the Israelites what he instructed them to bring upon those people in Canaan. They're going to be pricks in their eyes. Now, you think maybe Paul was thinking about, I'm going to get rid of all these Christian type peoples out of all this land. I'm going to get rid of them. The Lord said it's hard to kick against those pricks because the Lord was blessing that, blessing those people. Now, so if the Lord does not work on commission, how does the Lord work? You're going to find that the Lord only works on commands, never a commission. Now, there's a difference. Those of you that have been in the service can understand this. Military officers are given a commission. That commission says you're to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. That's pretty broad. Doesn't tell me what to do at all. Doesn't say what you're to do, what you're going to do. That's what a commission is. But a command is completely different. Brother Lyman's an old Marine. I'm sure he's used to hearing commands a lot. But a command is very specific. It not only tells you where to go, where not to go, what you've got to go with, what you're to say, what you're to do when you've got there. What do I have to support me on this command? Now, if you look in the 10th chapter of the book of Matthew, starting with the 5th verse, you'll notice that when the Lord sent his disciples out, those apostles, he said he sent them first and then commanded them to do something. Now, when you begin looking at the difference between a commission and a command, this is a beautiful command that the Lord gave his people. Told them where not to go to start. If I get a command, don't go over to Hill 320. Somebody else is covering that. Don't go over there. But I want you not to go in the land of the Samaritans. Do not go into the land of the Gentiles. You think, wait a second, Lord. If I'm going to go out and save souls eternally, don't you want me to go over to where those people are, the Samaritans? And don't you want me to go the places to save their souls? See that? If the Lord says don't go there, there must be a reason. But go ye rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That command told them specifically where to go. Okay, Lord, I know where to go, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to do when I get there. And when you go there, preach, sing. See, he even told them what to say. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. So he told them what they were even going to do in this command, which was very detailed, where not to go, where to go, what to say when you get there. Okay, so what assets am I got to have to get me there? Don't worry about the gold and the silver. Don't worry about those things. The Lord was going to provide all of that. Everything that the Lord did when he sent him out was by command. Have you ever thought about why Adam failed? You know, we hear people talk about sometimes, well, he ate of the forbidden fruit. Well, that was a result. That was a cause. But that's not why he failed. Look in Genesis 2, the 5th chapter, and you will see that Adam was commanded not to eat that fruit. He broke a command. Regardless of what the command was, that command happened to be not to eat that fruit, but Adam was commanded not to eat of that fruit, and he did. Now, I want you to notice, Eve did not receive that command. If I receive a command in the service, that command is to me and to me only. It's not to my replacement, somebody that's going to be coming down the road a few years later. It's not to somebody over in some other unit. When we receive a command, it's to us specifically. We are responsible for carrying it out, not our replacement down the road somewhere. Now, Adam received a command not to eat of that fruit, and he did, and we know the results of that. The Bible says Eve was deceived, but Adam was not deceived. That's why we go to the sin of Adam. Sorry, fellas, we can't blame it on our wives because of something like that happened. That command was specifically to us. Now, when he told them, have you noticed what he told them to do when they got there, those disciples? Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead. You think we can do that? Raise the dead? All of those things that he instructed them to do over there. Mark puts it in the 16th chapter, in the 17th and 18th verses, that if they drink any harmful thing, you know, these signs, that's a sign. These signs will follow you. Now, are those signs with us today? Am I going to play with snakes? I don't think so. I'm not going to start playing with serpents, or I'm not going to drink any deadly thing as they did at that time. Remember when Paul was on the Isle of Patmos and was shipwrecked? They were building a fire because they were all cold and wet. Paul reached down in the wood pile and there was a viper got a hold of his hand. And he shook it off. What did all the people say? Well, he must be a robber. Really must be a big sinner because that viper bit him. They waited. He didn't die. He must be a god. Can you see how they changed from being, he must be a robber, he must be a sinner, to he must be a god, just that quick? When we're beginning to look at when we think about what a command really was. When Jesus was here on the earth, when he preached, when he spoke, did God the Father give him a commission to do that? Have you thought about that? Because if Christ received a commission, then he would pass that commission on to us. Look in the 12th chapter of the book of John, the 49th verse. Christ himself said, I have not spoken of myself, but the Father which sent me, he gave me a command, what I should say, what I should speak. Do you realize Christ himself received a command from the Father? Not a commission. He was commanded, what therefore I say, so I speak. What therefore the Father saith to me, so I speak. Christ himself upon this earth received a command from the Father. All through the book of John, what a beautiful book that is on commands. Doesn't say, we ought to. If the Lord says we ought to do something, he's commanded us to do that, folks. Look at all, starting with the 12th chapter of the book of John, all the way through the 17th, you're going to see commands. A new command have I given you. What are those commands that John's talking about? I love John's writings. I thought Brother Henry was talking about. I find a favorite verse about every 2 or 3 days. And then, boy, that's good. I want to really remember that. And then soon later. I love John's writings on command. Remember when on the Sea of Galilee, when Christ was walking up that sea, and he chose those disciples which were to be his apostles. Have you noticed what they were doing when he chose them and where they were at the time? Some were in the boat, some were on the shore. But what were they doing? Peter was fishing. If you look at Peter's writings all through the Bible, he brings in a lot. He fishes, bring 3,000 in Acts chapter 2. 3,000 souls are brought in. You won't find that with John. Peter was fishing, bringing those in. What was John doing? He was mending nets. He was inside the boat, inside the church, and he was mending nets. Peter was bringing them in. So those of you who think, I've never baptized anybody, maybe that's not your call. Peter baptized those and brought them in. Once they were in the church, that's where trouble starts sometime, isn't it? Because that's where Satan really begins to attack. John's writing is a mender of the nets of those that are already in the boat. You will see that. Oh, a new commandment have I given you, that you love one another as I have loved you. You see how important that little word as is? There's not a period there. We are to love one another, period, no. As I have loved you. How much did Christ love us? He died for us. By the way, he never says, would I have loved one for another either. I've heard that quoted. Oh, would I have loved one for another. The Bible doesn't say that. It says love one to another. That is different. You can have love for your spouse, and she may never know it unless you express that love to her.
Yeah.
See, to shows action.
Right.
You are to have love one to another. If you truly love someone, they're going to know it. But that's the command that we are to do, to show love one to another, as all through that book of John is talking about. When we begin looking at all the commands that the Lord gave his people, I can tell you that Great Commission never was given, and it doesn't exist today. So I've heard old Baptists talk about that. Do we have a Great Commission now? Never had one to start with. And I get that blank look, very easily. We are commanded to do those things that the Lord, not because of what the Lord, we have done for the Lord. Now, 16th chapter of the book of Matthew, remember when Christ he asked questions. Can you picture yourself sitting there when Christ asked a question? Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Some say you're Apollos, some say Cephas or one of the prophets, but whom say ye that I am? What I love about the King James, if it starts with a Y, it's plural.
Yeah.
If it starts with a T, it's singular. Now the word you is used over 2,000 times in our Bible, but the meaning is clear. When he was asking asking the disciples, whom say ye that I am, that's plural. That tells me he was asking them all. Peter spoke up, as he always did, and usually got himself in trouble. But he said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed that unto thee. He was talking to one person at that point, and that was Peter, because thee is singular, starts with a T. I give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. The gates of hell shall not prevail against that. What does that mean? What were the keys of the kingdom of heaven? I think he used one of those keys in Acts chapter 2 and one of them in Acts chapter 10. Now, what about us going into all the world and preaching the gospel as we hear so much about on that Great Commission? Acts chapter 2, when Peter preached to the Jews, he preached to the Gentiles in Acts chapter 10, but the Jews in Acts chapter 2. There were devout men, Jews, there in Jerusalem, from every nation under heaven. Peter was preaching to the Jews. There was a great concern at that time about a Gentile church and a Jewish church. The Jews, we're dogs. Does the Jew really want to stay on the same side of the street with us? Can we get together in church? Peter preached to the Jews, devout men of every nation. Then he went to Acts chapter 10 at the house of Cornelius, and he preached to the Gentiles, to that family. Keys. That kingdom of heaven is not like the old jokes you hear now. St. Peter is standing at the pearly gate. How many times have we heard that? See, that's where they get that, but it's completely wrong. Peter does not have the keys to eternal heaven to determine whether you get in the gate or not. The keys to the kingdom of heaven is the church itself. That is the kingdom of heaven that's under reference here. Amen. For both the Jews and the Gentiles because of his preaching. The Apostle Paul preached. Of course, he was the apostle to the Gentiles, but he preached to them, to the Jews and to the Gentiles. Persecuted on the way to Damascus. When he said he was given authority, I want you to think about something. Paul was a member of the Sanhedrin. At the age of 13, he studied at the feet of Gamaliel, the most learned person at that time, knowing the Old Testament, very knowledgeable on all of those things. Thought he was doing God's will when he was trying to run the Gentiles out of the country, killing them. Remember when Stephen was stoned in the 7th chapter of the book of Acts? Paul gave his consent. You know why that was necessary? He had to have an approving member of the Sanhedrin to approve a death at that time. Now, the Jews' manner of death was by stoning. The Romans used the cross. That's why Stephen was stoned. Paul gave the consent. That's why he had a commission and authority from the chief priest to do the same thing. Caused them to blaspheme. He watched as they were killed. Can you imagine when Saul's name was changed to Paul, how he felt about all of those things, how terrible that must have felt him, but he thought he was doing God's will all the time with that commission that he had from the chief priest on the road to Damascus to cause havoc within the church. I am so thankful we don't have to worry here in Wichita Falls or other places about somebody coming in. Can you imagine preaching in a synagogue as they were? Here comes Paul and Saul at that time and carrying you out and putting you to death. Paul himself was later stoned at Lystra, stoned, and they thought he was dead. They hauled him out of the city and threw him on the ground. He was preaching the next day. I don't know if I'd keep preaching or not if something like that happened. But can you see the great blessings that they had? I'm going to be very mindful of time. I know it's going to be a long time, but I want us to understand that any time all of us are having a biblical discussion and it gets off on a ground that's going to cause arguments, you can find, regardless of what faith they are, that if you stay with biblical terms, the understanding will come much more quickly. Even if they disagree, they will understand why it is that you believe the way you do. That term reverend, I've been called reverend so many times. Our little local Amarillo paper that I went, that one of our most blessed members had never heard of the Primitive Baptist until we did her husband's funeral. And it was one of those things, Sister Mary, you all know who I'm talking about. He was a body shop manager at the Ford House. Forgive me for a personal story, but it just shows how the Lord works in these ways sometimes. She called me and says, Dan is in the hospital. Can you come visit him? Well, I knew he was a body shop manager at the Ford House. They weren't going to church anywhere. Nowhere at all. I visited with him. He said, well, I wanted to call because my great-grandpa was one of those old hardships. How many times have we heard that? I mean, his funeral, she's been there ever since. How do you preach somebody out of hell who never goes to church? See how silly that is? And yet the great comfort they can get. The manager at the funeral home called me and said he's very upset with our local Amarillo paper because they had been changing obituaries. You think they've been doing what? The family approves this, submits it, and then they will change the wording. So guess what I did? Trouble real fast. I went to see the publisher of that paper. They have a booklet of approved terms to be used in journalism. Let's see. By the way, you know what it be not you call master, for one is your master, even Christ and all you have raised your Father upon the earth. All the ones that Christ said don't use, that was amongst their approved terms. Elder was not in there. It was for a month or two after that, then they went back to their old ways. You know, but when they begin looking, that word reverend is used one time in the entire Bible. Psalms 111 and 9. He sent redemption under his people. He hath commanded his covenant forever. Holy and reverend is his name. The only time it's used is pertaining to God. And the reason I mention that, reverend is used one time, applying to God. Commission is used one time, given to Saul by the chief priest. If we're not amongst the old Baptists going to call each other reverend, why in the world should we argue about whether the commission still exists or not? That's a term that is used. Biblical terms simplify things so much. And if those things are done in love, best or not, I don't know if they'll be back or not. Here just a couple days ago, one of our young members, person was repairing his water system. They got to talking religion. Well, he was in church Sunday and loved the term love and those kind of things. We tried to speak on that some. But they understand that first. Have you noticed that whether they understand the doctrine or not, they understand what love is amongst the old Baptists. You know why it's there? Right back to John. We are commanded to do that. Now, there's some people, I'm glad the Lord's not this way. There's some people I love a little less than others. Aren't you glad that that's not what the Lord does? His love is perfect. There is no less love with him. He has total love and he has total hate. But we do love one another. We're commanded to do that. If you're going to say, I'm going to keep the Lord's commandments, and you can't love someone, you must. You're commanded to do that. Now, in the 17th chapter of John, and we know that's a prayer that Christ was praying to the Father himself. But, you know, as thou hast loved me, thou hast loved them. Do you think God the Father loves you any less than he loved Jesus, his son? That doesn't say that, does it? Can you imagine that God the Father loves each one of you with the same amount of love that he had for Jesus? That's why we are commanded to love one another. Don't break that commandment, folks. No different than breaking all the other commandments. The Lord does not work. The Lord himself received that commandment from the Father. Everything that he said. What's the difference between saying and speaking? what I should say and what I should speak. Okay, well, that's kind of, I've got a daughter that's an English teacher. That really doesn't make good sense to this fella. When we say something, that has a connotation of past tense. What you say? Something that's been said. And what I'm speaking now, the words that I'm using now, the words that have been said, even back through the Old Testament, are the inspired words of God. I like that King James translation that is in the term version because of how simple that it makes, and we can spend a lot of time talking on that. I've had to do that with some who bring their other forms of Bible to church. But what a blessing. Just remember that the Lord commands. He does not commission. He never has commission. He commands us to do those things, and therefore we need to fulfill His command. I hope you can come out to little church in West Texas and visit with us sometime. You hear so many times when you go to a meeting, you'll hear a minister say y'all come. In West Texas, we have a plural to y'all. See, we can say y'all come see us when you can. In West Texas, the plural is all y'all. All y'all come out and see us when you can. God bless you. Come forward.